All right, we're gonna start here in just a couple of minutes. It's looks like it's 6:58. Looks like there's a couple people watching. If you can, in the comments, just like let me know that you can hear me. That would be great. I'd really appreciate that. That way we can be good to go for 7 o'clock. Just type "I hear you, Denny" or something like that. That would be wonderful. If not, I'll just assume you can hear me, and hopefully I'm not just a talking head. Checking one or two more things here real quick, and we'll start in just a minute. Oh, Sandra says you can hear me. Wonderful. I'm like knocking stuff over here. Okay. Let's see. It's 6:59. My laptop says 7. My computer says 6:59. So let's go ahead and I'll just start going over a couple of things here. First off, hello. Thanks for joining. I've never done one of these before. A live stream. I watch a lot of YouTube. I don't put a lot on YouTube. So this is kind of different for me. So hopefully it'll be encouraging and a good evening for us, those of us who are watching. So why are we here? But first off, who am I? Why is a random guy like making a college video? The last several years, I've had the privilege of going to Gallia Academy High School and talking to Sandra May's senior English classes. I've really enjoyed that. This year, for obvious reasons, that didn't work out. So I decided instead, I got the idea last week, why not do a live stream, which will turn into an archive video, which hopefully can not only be viewed tonight, but be viewed down the road. Just some questions about college. Going to the school and discussing college, I always had a great time doing that, and it always amazed me the variety of questions that I got. And sometimes working in higher ed for over 10 years myself, sometimes things I wouldn't even think of, people would ask me. So anyway, so that's why we're here. There is a live chat, so if you tune in whenever you get here, if you have questions for me, I'll keep an eye on that. Just ask. If there aren't any questions showing up there, I do have content. I'm basically going to go over the content I had from the last time I visited Gallia Academy. So I'll be running through that, but I will keep an eye on chats, and I'll try to give preference to those. But if not, we'll have enough content here to fill the time. I got scheduled from 7 to 8. If something happens and we get like a really good discussion going, I'm not going to shut us down just at 8. We can go as long as it takes if people have a lot of questions. It occurred to me I probably ought to do a disclaimer because I work for Marshall, but this is not Marshall sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I am right now acting as an individual agent. I think the phrase that's often tossed around is the opinions of such and such, meaning me, do not necessarily reflect those of Marshall University. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that or not. It feels like I should. But anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and jump in and talk about college. Going over my notes from last year, the first set of questions talked a lot about housing and dorm rules and things like that. So some questions including like how strict are dorm rules? It really depends on where you go to school. I went to a private Christian university that was, you'd say, maybe relatively on the strict side. A lot of times a state school may not be anywhere near as strong or as strict, rather, on rules like that, but it's a good thing to research, know what you're getting into. Because I know when I went away to school, sometimes people would complain about rules, and I always kind of thought, well, you knew when you came. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Can you commute from your own apartment as a freshman? Maybe, but a lot of schools have restrictions on that, sometimes up until junior year. That's another thing. If you think you might want to do that, definitely check into that before going to school. If that is, especially if it's a deal breaker, don't let it deal break you, I guess. I don't know if that made sense. Okay, this is a good one. Some tips on renting apartments and houses, especially with other roommates. It is a commitment. I usually joke with the students when I go to the school. I talk about it's not quite like getting married, but it's up there. Lease is legally binding, so anytime you jump into that. It's not necessarily something you want to take lightly. So you want to make sure you feel good about the property and feel good about the roommates that you have selected, because leases can be costly to break. If you get out of it, you might be stuck paying a lot of money. Also, if you maybe choose roommates that aren't the best, you don't want to get stuck paying someone else's portion of the rent. So before jumping into something like that, make sure you feel good about the people you're jumping into that with. And sometimes I have no data on this or anything, but I've heard anecdotally a lot of times someone, even who was a good friend, maybe growing up, doesn't always translate into being a great roommate. So really, it's something you want to be cautious about. Don't just jump into it. Here's a good one. How do you find out the roommate that you'll have, or where you find out who your roommate's going to be before move-in day? As far as on campus, yeah, Sandra's got a question here. I'll jump into that too. What would be best, on campus or off campus? It's a really great question. Both have advantages and disadvantages. I really think everyone at some point in their life ought to live on campus. It's unlike anything else. There's always something to do, always something going on, lots to get involved with, and it's nice because everything's right there. Not to mention living in a hall type format, which when I say a hall type format, a lot of newer residence halls are kind of set up more like apartments anyway. They're not like a hall with 30 rooms and a shared bathroom, maybe like they used to be years ago. But that being said, it's a great time to meet people, and a lot of times you make lasting friendships. I know I still have people from college that I talk to, and a lot of the best relationships from college, I think, were the people that I had lived with. So living on campus is a great thing. I think at least to try for a while. Sometimes people get kind of burnt out on that and want a little bit more space. Living on campus, it can be more costly compared to getting an apartment. A lot of this is going to depend too. I mean, where are you renting? Are you renting somewhere really high end? Are you renting somewhere maybe not so nice? And because not only do you have housing, but you've got you have room and board, which is meal plan and things like that. And when it comes to a meal plan, almost always you can go somewhere and shop for groceries cheaper. So there's pluses and minuses to both. So you just want to think about what's going to fit your needs best. Oftentimes, it's not uncommon for a college to require a student to be on campus the first 2 years, unless they're commuting from home. And usually they give a radius. I think Marshall's radius is like 50 miles, and something like that's not uncommon at all. So you will see that, which is that's a really good question. Let's see. Before renting, also, you want to make sure to check with housing to make sure you're not in violation of rules. I know where I did undergrad, you had to actually apply to get off campus. And a lot of times, if you've already signed a lease and you run afoul of their rules, they really don't care. So make sure that you're taking care of that ahead of time and just looking and seeing what's out there. Let's see. How would I move on campus if I already lived off campus? Would it cost more to move on campus? We talked a little bit about the costs just a couple minutes ago. But a university, I mean, empty beds are money lost. So I think they would always take you if you left campus and wanted to come back. I don't think they'd ever turn you down unless they were at capacity. I think they'd always take you back. So you certainly could do that. Here's a good question. What is an RA? An RA is a resident advisor. And this is a person that's in charge of an area of a residence hall, a resident advisor. Usually a residence hall will have many resident advisors. And then there's usually I think Marshall, they might call them area coordinators. They call them, where I did undergrad, they call them something else. They're basically above an RA. And some of them are in charge of the entire hall. And usually they have a number of RAs that work under them. RAs do things like they enforce rules, typically plan activities. They provide support, and that could be someone you can go talk to if you have any number of issues, whether it be academic, social, personal, or whatever it might be. They can be a good first person to go to, and oftentimes they can make referrals to elsewhere on campus, because typically a campus will have a lot of resources for students. I know my experience at Marshall, we try to work together. We try not to necessarily do each other's jobs. We try to find the best person for the job, and an RA should know about that and should hopefully be able to make a referral to the most appropriate resource, whatever that might be. I've got one here I want to come back to, and you'll see why later. Let's talk about Greek life a little bit, because I know when I visited Gallia previously, there were a number of questions about Greek life. So one thing, I like the way this question was put, because someone asked, what are the consequences of getting caught at a frat party? Well, and the interesting thing is a frat party is not necessarily either against the law or against any university rules. I mean, fraternities are legitimate organizations and they're allowed to have events. So when we say, a lot of times I think that phrase frat party takes on a negative connotation, but in the most basic sense, there's nothing wrong with it. That said, underage drinking is illegal. So if you're not 21, I wouldn't be caught with any alcohol. And also they're not just drinking, but a basic, when we have a basic party, a basic get together is fine. With that being said, if there's anything from noise complaints to other laws being broken, then that's not a good thing. And then you run the risk of not only getting in trouble with, let's suppose it's a fraternity house somewhere in the middle of town, you not only run the risk of getting in trouble with the town, the municipality or the city or wherever it is, but sometimes a campus themselves may even have sanctions on that. Something interesting I do at Marshall is I'm actually a conduct justice, and what we do is we hear from students sometimes who get into trouble, and sometimes the events happen off campus. There still can be on campus ramifications for that. Now that's kind of a murky area, so there's a lot of things that can go into that. But in the most basic sense, even if something happens off campus, there can be on campus issues. So you just want to be careful of that, because if you do go to a party, whether it's a fraternity party or otherwise, you want to be sure to just act responsibly, act like you have some sense. Would be my advice to about anybody. Let's see, Sandra. If on campus, do freshmen typically have a roommate, or do they have a roommate usually? I'd say usually, and I think as a freshman, it's a really good idea. A lot of universities do have options for single rooms, which kind of sounds good, but I always found it was nice to have a roommate. For a period of time, I didn't have one. And it's surprising how actually lonely that can get. I think especially at that stage of life. I mean, I live alone essentially now, and it doesn't bother me. At that age of my life, I think it did. So I think a roommate can be a really good thing. And as far as while we're talking about roommates, I know when I went away to school, they gave you like a questionnaire, and the idea was to try to match you with someone with whom you would be compatible. So when we talk about having a roommate, it's not necessarily like they pull, it's not like Powerball, or they don't necessarily like pull two names out of a hat or anything like that. There's usually a little bit more logic that goes behind it. I mean, they want you to succeed. They want you to be paired with someone who it's going to work out with, because roommate issues. I mean, you think about RA, more roommate issues there are. I mean, they only have so many hours in a day, and that is their time that it's going to eat up. Of course, that's what they're there for, but still, it just makes everyone's life easier when people are getting along with their roommate. So there's a rationale to how they decide that. But I think especially at the freshman level, we'll put it this way, it's very common to have a roommate. And if it's an apartment style hall, it might not be maybe someone you share your bedroom, but there might be maybe say 4 single rooms that share like a bathroom and a kitchen or something like that. I've seen setups like that too. I visited a number of colleges in my day, and I have seen things like that too, that essentially work out to be like a 4-bedroom apartment or something like that. Greek life. I want to get back to Greek life a little bit. So what does Greek life do? I think Greek life sometimes gets a bad rap. I know there was even I think it was on ABC or something. There was a show a while back. It was actually back when I was in college. There was a show that was called Greek, and it kind of chronicled all of the shenanigans of it was I think a fictional fraternity and even a fictional college. But the name of the show was Greek, so kind of chronicled all of that. Greek life, it's not just about partying. Frats and sororities, they exist for fellowship, for service, among other things. Like I said, they can get a bad rap, but they do actually do some really great things. And Greek life, when we think about a resume, when we think about experience, because at Marshall I work in career education, so that's always something we're thinking about, is how do you build a resume, how do you use experiences today, how do you use experiences now to help you in the future. And actually Greek life can be something that's really great for that, particularly if you get into leadership, because you have all kinds of skills that you can show on a resume. So Greek life, like I said, anything you get involved with, you want to be careful, but I think Greek life gets an unnecessarily bad rap sometimes. Of course, that being said, use good discretion and basically don't do anything stupid. Generic advice. So how do you get involved with fraternity and sororities? Typically, they recruit early on in the year, and with a lot of anti-hazing things like you see these days, I don't know if you even see what we call pledging as much. It used to be what happened. I know even when I was a freshman, I never did Greek life. I never pledged or anything like that, but you would see people pledging, and it used to involve partaking in a number of humiliating acts. Like I remember people coming to class in togas and having to carry like an egg around with them for 3 weeks and things like that. And rightfully so. We've got a lot more anti-hazing things out there. Marshall had a banner the other year, which I loved. I think it said, "You don't need hazing to be amazing," which is really true. So that being said, I don't think pledging is necessarily what it used to be, but still, they want members and they will actively recruit. I know Marshall has recruiting fairs and involvement fairs. I think most universities do. Where I did undergrad, did things like that as well. So if anyone's interested in Greek life, definitely that's just something you want to pay attention to. Let's see, Sandra Mays, do you have to live at the assigned Greek house you join? That's a good question. I think it's encouraged. I do know of cases where it does not happen, because that's a interesting thing to think about too. Fraternity houses, they also get a number of reputations. Means, and like anything else, there's probably some truth to it, probably a lot of legend wrapped up in it. Yeah, I would say probably the easy answer is no. I'm sure they love for you to do it. I do know of instances where it doesn't happen, so which is good, because it just gives you options. I'm just always all about options. So another good question, just going off the list from the other year, pertains to stress relief. So someone asked, what is the best stress relief? When we talk about stress relief, I think it's a case of you got to know yourself, and you got to know where do you de-stress the most. For instance, I love going on walks, in which luckily these days you can actually usually still do. I love things like that. Some people might find it relaxing to go play a loud video game or Call of Duty or something like that and go shoot people in a video game. I know when I was away at college, the people on the other side of the wall from me, they played Call of Duty, and it's so loud, it pretty much sounded like a Civil War reenactment when they did it. But I think that's how they unwound and how they de-stressed. I'm not good at those games necessarily. I've never found them relaxing. I guess some people do. Everything from maybe playing a sport, going for a drive. There's a number of things that you can do. So I think you just got to know yourself and know how you de-stress. What's more important, I think, is the de-stressing time is really. It really is important. But I think when we get busy, we run the risk of having it not happen. So we also want to think about things like, okay, how do I find time to unwind? How do I find time to de-stress? And I always encourage people to write it in a planner, just like you would a meeting, a class, an exam, or anything like that. Because if you don't write it down, it just may not happen. So I think time to de-stress is every bit as legitimate as that meeting or that class or going to work or anything else you have to do. So I schedule it in, which to me is even more important necessarily than what you do. Provided you're not doing something that breaks the law or something like that. Someone had asked about ROTC. Some benefits of ROTC could include potentially discounted food, scholarships, leadership skills. And that's another great thing when we talk about a resume, another great way to look for leadership skills. There was a Marshall alumni that I had a video chat with 2 or 3 days ago. Someone with the virus that's been dislocated. And We were talking about a number of things as far as leadership skills, and he had a really good resume as someone who'd worked in sales. But this individual had some athletic experience too, and that was some advice I gave him: is, you know what, it's athletic experience, but you're not necessarily just like playing around out there. I mean, you're developing teamwork skills, leadership skills. I would argue communication skills and other things like that. So you want to be sure to market those skills. And the same is true whether it's ROTC, or we just talked about Greek life, any kind of extracurriculars, any kind of work experience. You want to be sure to market those great things. So I want to shift gears here and discuss a little bit about majors and classes and things like that. Now, this is a little bit closer to the area where I work at Marshall. A question that was asked is, can we change our majors as many times as we want? I'm going to say yes and no on that. And when I say yes, it's because there's not really a hard limit that I'm aware of. Some places may have that. I think I've actually heard of some places maybe enforcing something like that. If that happens at Marshall, I've never heard of it. And seeing as I work in the business of changing majors, I find it highly unusual that I wouldn't hear of it. I don't think anyone's going to come up to you and say, no, you've changed too many times. We're going to forbid you to do this. That being said, you run the risk of, the more you change, you run the risk of getting to where you're not making progress towards your degree. And that's definitely not a good situation to be in. Because one or two major changes, things like that happened. But this past academic year, back when we were still on campus, it was either right after or right before Christmas. I don't remember. I met with a student who, an incoming freshman, so this was basically at the end of first semester, who is on about their fifth major. And I'm like, wow, 5 majors in one semester. And I don't want to. Sometimes people have a lot of questions. They're figuring things out. I'm still figuring things out. So when I say that, it's not that I'm putting anyone down. So please don't have that be a takeaway. But I just wonder if that equates, if you do the math, less than 1 month per major, I believe. If my math was wrong, please tell me. So I can't, maybe we're average 3 weeks to a month in a major if you're going at the same rate as that student did. And if you're switching majors that often, I question the decision making that goes behind that. Are they changing their major every time they get back a bad test? Or I don't know. It just seemed like an awful lot for me. So switching majors is okay, but you want to have a rationale for why you do it. I would say you want to be able to articulate how it's going to move you closer to your goals. Let's see, Sandra, intramural sports a possibility? Yeah, absolutely. Intramural sports are great. If you're like me and you're not particularly athletic, they're a way to stay in shape. Because as a side note, we have a thing we call the freshman 15, meaning sometimes students tend to gain a little bit of weight when they go away to college, particularly if you're living on campus. Maybe you played sports in high school, you're not getting as much activity as you used to. You're going to dining halls, you have all you can eat food, stress oftentimes, and it's not uncommon for people to put on a few pounds in college. To the point where it has a name, the freshman 15. So intramural sports are great, I think, just for staying in shape, but also, I think developing those teamwork skills and a lot of the other things we've already talked about, as far as maybe even marketing yourself on a resume, if you could be a team captain or something like that, or even for your team do social media. Something like that would be really great. But also, it's just fun. I used to play a lot of what you would know it to see me now. I used to play a lot of ultimate frisbee. I just think it's fun. We talked about ways. A couple minutes ago, we were talking about ways to de-stress, and I think intramurals can be a really great way to do that too. Great way to make friends. I'm all about intramural sports. The possibilities for that, they'll differ from college to college for sure, but definitely something that you can look into. Because here's the thing too, if you're like an actual college athlete, it can be. When we work with them at Marshall, it's very demanding on your schedule. It's a wonderful thing, great opportunity, but there's no two ways about it. It's very demanding on a schedule. So if you want to play sports without just the commitment that's that grueling, intramurals could be a really great thing for you to look at, for sure. For sure. So talking about majors, okay, how many classes do I take along with my major? Can it be any classes I want? A major is basically it's a specified set of classes to prepare you for a given career. So if I want to be an accounting major, it's the classes I take are to prepare me to be an accountant when I graduate. And in order to be an accountant when I graduate, I have to take a set number of accounting classes. I have to have some accounting classes, or how dare I call myself an accounting major. Now, when I go to school, every class I take is not going to be an accounting class. There's going to be things known as electives. At Marshall, we have things, I think we call them Core 1 and Core 2 curriculum, and that includes a lot of things like the general education requirements, and that usually includes some things in the arts, things like public speaking, which I actually teach for Marshall, which is really great. Sometimes psychology is in there, typically some math and some English and things like that as well. So we have gen eds, and then we have things like electives, which can be really great too. When I was an undergrad, I took an elective class on the world wars, which I love communication classes, but at that point I was in my fourth semester being away, and I kind of had communication classes coming out of my ears. It seemed like I just needed a change. So I took a class on the world wars, and it was very fascinating. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a nice change of pace. It's just kind of change of scenery. Let's see, Sandra, workout facilities free for students to use. It depends on how you define free. I know at Marshall there's a fee, a rec center fee that's kind of like rolled into tuition. I would say I think when I went away to school, that's how they did it as well. It's a case of, even if they don't charge you or actually like take money out of your pocket month to month, it's a case of I'm sure you pay for it. I think that the cost typically is rolled in. Just about every place I've ever been, that's how it's worked. I'm sure out there somewhere there's an exception. I found there's usually an exception, but typically I think they just roll the cost in. Okay, so we talked about majors. Let's see here. How long do you have to take your generals until you have to start taking things within your major? That really depends. And this is where colleges have these wonderful people called academic advisors. And these are great people to talk to because they know your program. They know the classes that you have to take. They know it inside and out. They know the best order to take things. They might say like, oh, no, you don't want to take these two classes together. They're both a lot of work. You'll kill yourself if you take those, not literally, but it'll just be a horrible workload if you take those classes together. You'll hate your life if you take those two classes together. Where they might say, you know what, by the end of sophomore year, you must take this class or you will not graduate on time. So those are really great people to go and get their advice. They know it inside and out. I know at Marshall, I really don't deal with scheduling because just we have a lot of experts, meaning the academic advisors who do it. And they do such a great job. I would just convolute things. I wouldn't do anywhere near the job that they do. So I don't even fool with it. But getting to know academic advisors pretty early on is definitely something I'd recommend. I think that's a question we have coming up anyway, but I'll just kind of toss you a little nugget on that right now. But anyway, to kind of get back to the question, how long do you have to take your generals until you have to start taking things in your major? It's really going to depend. Some people take gen eds the first semester, the first year. It really depends. They can, and I'm underlining this like 5 times, they can be easier. So in some cases, they're harder. It just really depends. Some people also take them, especially if they don't quite know what they want to do yet. They might get general education requirements out of the way if they're still kind of solving questions and trying to figure out, what maybe more what they want to do down the road. So they can, if you get to college and you have either an idea of what you want to do, or maybe you have no idea what you want to do, gen eds can serve as a little bit of a cushion, but that cushion eventually depletes itself as you go through. So even day one, if you're not sure, you want to be making progress toward a decision. So if you want to switch a major, who do you go to? If you go to Marshall, you come to me. I'd love to talk to you about that. That's a big part of my job, is students who, if they're either some different situations that we run into is sometimes a student, they don't know exactly what they want to do, but they know it's not what they're doing right now. Maybe they're just pick one at random, engineering maybe. So I do have occasionally engineering students come to me who they struggle with the math a little bit. So they might say, I don't know what I want to do, but I swear it's not engineering. Okay, we can work with that. Sometimes a student has no idea what they want to do. I can work with that too. I have some questions I can ask you. I have some assessments I can give you. Sometimes someone's like 90% sure, but they just need that little bit of extra verification, extra assurance. Maybe I'm trying to think of a word here. That they just want to check things out a little bit more. We'll just leave it at that. So I can help with that. So students who find themselves in any of those situations, and countless others, come and talk to me. My department is called Career Education. What we're seeing across the board is typically colleges have had something like a career services, and the issue I think with that is, even though they're great departments, a lot of times students would say, well, I'll come see them when it's time to graduate. We'll do a resume and I'll get hired somewhere, hopefully. Whereas career education, we tend to look at students not even when they get there, but even before. We even reach out to prospective students and incoming students, and we want to impact them every year they're at Marshall, and also serve them as alumni as well. So a lot of times a career ed model is a little more comprehensive than a career services model. So we're seeing career ed, I think, at more and more universities these days. But if you don't go to Marshall, if you go somewhere else, find career ed people. If you can't locate one of them, an academic advisor is a great place to start if you have questions about a major, or if you want to change a major, or something like that. Oh, Sandra, this is an excellent question. Can students job shadow? Yes, not only can they job shadow, they really should job shadow. My department runs a great job shadowing program. We just hired someone July or August of last year, who's really taken the program and ran with it at Marshall, and doing an incredible job with it, and has made a lot of contacts in the community. And what job shadowing is I compare it to trying on like a pair of shoes, or test driving a vehicle, or something like that. Just giving it a try to see if it's for you. I mean, I always compare it to, like I said, shoes or a car. Like I'd hate to throw away $60 on a pair of shoes I don't like. So why would anyone want to spend who knows how many thousands of dollars in 4 years on a degree that's going to lead them to a career that they don't want? So that's the beauty of job shadowing. It's great to have firsthand experience, and again, it can be for people who are undecided, people who just want more information. Sometimes I've told students to do 2 job shadows. If they're torn between 2 things, go job shadow each and see which one seems like a more natural fit. So job shadowing is incredible, and it's one of those things I wish I would have done more of. For sure, I didn't really think that far ahead. I didn't know all that much about it when I was a student. Honestly, if I had done that as a student, who knows where I'd be now? Who knows if I would even be working in higher ed? But that being said, I like higher ed, so who knows? We'll never know. But I got really not that I like to just talk about because it's not all that exciting, but for my story and my career and where I wound up turned out really well, considering at times how little thought and preparation I put into it. I'll put it like that. Sometimes I didn't investigate things the best. I just kind of went with the flow, and seeing as unstrategic as I was, things have not gone all that badly for me. Things have actually gone pretty well because I'm doing great. I'm doing something I love. But I tell students this, I've said this in class presentations before. That being said, when you are kind of that haphazard in how you go about things, there's no guarantee things are necessarily going to work out all that well for you. So job shadowing can be a really great thing to look at. Let's see, scheduling courses. The first time you schedule courses, that'll tend to be at your orientation. Although that being said, orientations this year, who knows what they may look like. Typically, orientations, that's a part of the day as you go, and you either create a schedule or have one prepared and handed to you, which typically, the people who make the schedules typically know what they're doing. But if there are concerns you have, definitely feel free to ask about that. That's your first schedule. Subsequent schedules at Marshall, you can sign up for classes online, and what happens is registration opens usually at the appointed date. It opens at 12 midnight, and there's actually, my understanding is a lot of times on campus the internet actually kind of bogs down for a little bit because so many people are trying to schedule, and yeah, so people are literally like their watch, 11:59, 12, click, schedule, hope I get my classes. So online registration is usually something you can do. If not, you can go make an appointment with an academic advisor, and again, they can help you. Typically, when it comes time to schedule classes, you want to schedule sooner rather than later, because some classes do fill up rather quickly, and sometimes a professor will let you do an overload. And if there's 30 seats in a class and you're the 31st person, they may let you in, they may not. Usually that's the instructor's discretion, and they're under no obligation to do that. Some might let you do it, some might not. And the ramifications of not getting into a class you want, sometimes it might be, oh, well, I didn't get the professor I wanted. Now I have to take the boring or the hard or the not so great one. Or maybe I didn't get the 2 p.m. class. Now I have to take the 8 o'clock a.m. section. And those are things that students complain about sometimes. And those are kind of, in the back of my mind, I'm always have a little bit of suck it up. But that being said, I was a student too, and I understand kind of where they're coming from. Sometimes more serious ramifications exist, like, okay, I couldn't get to class this semester, so now I'm a semester behind. Am I going to graduate on time? And if you don't graduate on time, which actually this is kind of I guess an okay rabbit hole to go down, graduating on time, it's a great goal, but I would always tell people it's better to get a degree you like and spend a little extra time, I feel, than to just do whatever it takes and graduate on time so you can feel like you did, and then a year or 2 years after graduation be just hating your degree or hating what you're doing with life. I think that extra investment of a semester can be a really good thing. That being said, when you spend more time there, it is additional time that you're not going to get back. It's additional money. So it's not something to be taken lightly either, but I think just, perspective is very healthy in that. Let's see, Sandra, do freshmen usually have courses in a classroom or online? Most freshmen I know, at least till present events took hold, would do classroom, like in-person classes. I've not heard, I don't know of really all that many students who do online classes. Some do. I'd say definitely more don't. Again, present circumstances notwithstanding. Online classes, I feel like tend to go to a little bit more upperclassmen and definitely graduate students. Don't hold me to that. There's no math like behind that answer, but that's kind of been my unofficial observation. Online classes, and like I said, who knows? Who knows what this thing will do, what we'll be doing in the fall and spring and beyond. I've not really heard of too many universities canceling or not canceling, like moving fall online. I know a number of universities have online summer sessions. Out of, an abundance of caution, which is probably a very good thing. But online classes present some unique circumstances and some unique challenges. Of course, there's a technical aspect of things, especially if you're not a real techie person, which really I'm not. I'm actually amazed I'm pulling off a live stream YouTube. I never thought I would do this. So I'm not real techie. So anyone that says they're not techie, I get it. I understand. But I think even more so of what you run into is you have to be disciplined to do an online class. I'll give you an example of that. When I was an undergraduate student, I had a class that was online, and I took it in the summer to graduate because I was pushing myself to graduate on time. And what happened was the professor would give you units, like unit 1, 2, 3, 4. Unit 4, we'll say unit 4. Unit 4 was due July 16th. And it was open there's a program we use called Blackboard, which is, I think pretty helpful. Maybe we'll chat about that later. The professor maybe gave you two and a half weeks to work on things. But everything must be until July 16th. Well, guess who was there July 15th and July 16th doing everything? Me. So if that's the extent of your self-discipline and, as far as keeping up, keeping a calendar and things like that, online classes may not be the best bet, especially as a freshman. But like I said, it's looking, these days like they're more of a necessary evil. That being said, I'll just kind of give a shout out to I don't think any are watching, but a shout out to my students at Marshall, because we've had to move everything online, and they've just done tremendous with it. They're just an incredible bunch, and I'm very proud of them. Most, if not, probably few, if any of them signed up for online classes. Literally and figuratively. Did they think they'd be doing online classes at least this semester? But they're handling it great, and they're really not all that bad. But you do have to be a little bit more disciplined. And I've known one or two that have had a little bit of a struggle, but across the board, my group has done really well. Books. How do you find out what books you'll need? Will they tell you before classes start? A university bookstore is a great place to go for that. They should have all of the lists. In fact, with me teaching at Marshall, they even send me things in the campus mail. They send me emails like, hey, dude, we need your book request. And I don't tend to change it a whole lot. So usually I just say, just order what's on file, and that tends to be fine. That said, and I hope bookstore people from Marshall don't, come after me with torches when I say this, but it's not just Marshall. I mean, it's bookstores across the board. I mean, they're great things. They serve a great purpose. There can be cheaper places to find books, and also renting books can be a wonderful thing as well. So that being said, if something is if it's in your major, you may want to keep the book. I mean, with me being a 2-time communication major, I teach communication stuff now. I'm happy I have old communication books. I actually pull them off my shelf and look things up from time to time. A couple times I've moved in the last several years. I'm lagging boxes of books. I'm like, why do I still have these things? But then I go look something up. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm happy I have these. But if it's a gen ed or something obscure, you might not necessarily need to haul a book around with you forever. So renting a textbook might be a really great thing for you to look at. My throat's getting dry. I found cheer wine at Save a Lot the other week, so that was great. Taste of the Carolinas. I need it. My allergy season's like killing my throat. So, okay, let's chat about class expectations. Because I know when I visited Gallia Academy previously, a lot of students have had questions about classroom expectations for a college and things like studying. A good rule of thumb about university is that the good news is that compared to high school, you will spend probably less time sitting in a classroom, and that probably sounds amazing, and it is, but there's a catch, is that the time you don't spend in a classroom, you'll probably need to spend studying. Okay, or working on papers. In other words, you'll do less in the classroom, more out of the classroom. And the final product, in a lot of cases, will probably be more time put in than when you were in high school. But it'll be you can kind of work the schedule a little bit more in your favor. You have a little bit more say over your schedule. You'll spend less time sitting in one place. I know for me that always, even though I'm sure I put in more time, that part alone made it a lot better. Just because I felt like I had more freedom over my schedule. I could do more of what I wanted when I wanted. And it's nice too, because if you're like me and you're not a morning person, you can try to schedule classes 10, 11 a.m. or later. You can try to avoid 8 a.m. classes, for instance. Owning is good if a person likes to highlight a lot. Absolutely. And I'm a paper fan. I like to write. I like to make notes. I like paper. But also, I know digital books are a big thing these days too. Sometimes students just get like a code and download a book and have it on a tablet, a laptop, a Kindle, or whatever device. So that's yet another option. When not just textbooks, but even like just books I've wanted to read, I found that electronic books, they've not offered the discount that I would have liked, and especially considering that with the fact I really like paper. I've really never gotten into digital books, but it's absolutely something that you can look at. Absolutely. Exams. I'll talk about exams. Because we talked about studying. Oh, also, actually, before we get into exams, we'll do exams. We'll put that on hold. Exams are given at different intervals by different professors. That's really going to depend upon the class. Some professors may give exams every few weeks. Some might only give a midterm and a final. Now, fewer exams might sound great, but the catch on that usually is going to be theoretically they're teaching somewhat the same amount of material. So if you have fewer exams, there's probably going to be more content on each one of those exams. Because I know it probably sounds great to have 2 exams a semester versus an exam every 3 weeks. But the problem with that is you're probably going to have a lot harder of exams, have to study a lot more for them. Not always, but probably 97, 98 times out of 100, that's going to be the case. So as far as exams go, count on your first score probably being the lowest. But then ideally what will happen, ideally, if we're talking real ideals, ideally you'll ace all of the exams. In the real world, what might happen is your first score might be a little bit lower until you learn the instructor's testing style. And then ideally, once you learn how they test, hopefully you can kind of learn the ins and outs a little bit more, and you can start to get better scores on your exams. Don't do what I did. A lot of times I would actually have a really good first exam, but then I'd get complacent and sometimes drop 1 or 2 letter grades when the second exam rolled around, and then however many subsequent exams or spend that time trying to dig out of a hole. So don't do that. If you did really well the first time around, then you did something right. Don't get complacent. If you didn't do so hot the first time around, try to identify where your weaknesses were in terms of an exam. One thing I did, one time when I went away to school, I took an exam. I didn't like it wasn't a terrible score, but it wasn't what I had hoped for. So I went to the professor. I said, hey, now, when I say go to the professor, you don't go and whine for a higher grade. You say something along the lines of, I see where I got on this exam. Can you give me some tips that might help me to increase my score on subsequent exams? I went and talked to this individual, and he gave me good advice, and it helped. And actually, the professor's still on my friends list. We still chat on Facebook sometimes. So it was not only allowed me to do better on his exams, but I actually, in the process, made a really great connection on campus too. And going and talking to professors, I mean, they're people. They're people just like everyone else. Don't be afraid of professors. You want to have respect for them. You don't want to. They're not your bro. Okay, they're not your. You don't want to get too casual with them, but at the same time, they're people too. It's not God you're talking to, so don't be too intimidated by them either. Just kind of find a healthy balance on that. Professors okay with online devices during class time? That's a good question. It's really going to depend on the class, on the professor. I think it depends on the device too. If they see a telephone, odds are they're going to assume you're texting. Some might just not care. I know some who don't really care all that much. Even me, when I teach, honestly, kind of the way I operate is if you're doing something to distract you, you're an adult, you're paying to be here, and that's your prerogative. I don't recommend it, but and that's when I say that's if you're distracting you. Now, if you're doing something that's causing disruptions to your classmates, and that's an entirely different ballgame, and I'm not at all okay with that. And that's when I'm going to say something to you to basically quit being obnoxious and follow the rules or get out. I've really rarely, I think only once or twice have I ever had to do that. And I think the person kind of got the message and is like, okay, fine. So, and we're talking like 1 or 2 times in like 10 years. That's not a lot. But most people, if there is a disruption, I try to address it early on. Just say, hey, can we not? And I found most students are pretty receptive to that. If it's a laptop, that's a little bit more of a gray area because a lot of people do use laptops to take notes. Sometimes instructors, though, they'll walk around. They might even try to look at your laptop to see if you're Facebooking or if you're taking notes in the class. So I think as far as electronics go, it's really going to depend upon what the device is. I will tell you, on my syllabi, I came up with a new rule for this semester, which, seeing as half the semester we've not met in person, I guess is kind of a moot point. But no AirPods, because I had students trying to sneak in and wear like the AirPods back in the fall, and that was driving me crazy. So I had to say no AirPods. And I think because I had put something on Facebook back when I did that, and I think a few of my colleagues probably followed my lead on that. So yeah, that's a really good question. And as far as class attendance goes, this is something else where you're going to find a wide degree of variance. Some instructors, they'll want you to be there every day on time. Some of them will take attendance. Some of them in a whole semester might only allow you 1 or 2 absences without penalty. Some have very strict attendance policies. Some don't even take attendance. But it's funny, that same professor that I went and talked to, I mentioned in the example like 2-3 minutes ago, I remember his attendance policy. He told us the first day of class is he's like, I don't take attendance, but he's like, honestly, if you skip class, you'll probably regret it. And I found that to be true because he was such a great guy and so smart, and he covered so much stuff. But and we're talking just like a standard 50-minute, 3 times a week class period. And if you missed one class period, you were behind and you needed to like do some catching up. I mean, it's the point where it's like, okay, if I do need to skip something, I don't want to skip this class. So when it comes to attendance, the most basic rule for attendance is be there anytime you can be. Communicate with an instructor if you can't. I found I like that. So if I have a student who they know they're not going to be there, I mean, I just love it if they shoot me an email. That being said, when you shoot me an email, don't phrase it like, hey, are we going to do anything important today? Kind of implying that we never do anything important. Even though you want to contact an instructor, that's not the way to do it. Don't backhandedly insult their class or their teaching style. Oh, are we doing anything important today? They're not going to appreciate that. And it might be better to phrase it like, I'm not going to be in class today. Can you let me know what I'm going to miss? Or even say, I'm not going to be in class. Can I make a time to come to your office? Can we make sure I'm not falling behind? Or something like that. You want to, if you must miss, you want to make sure that you're still communicating with them that the class is a priority for you. All right. So transferring schools is another thing that came up. During the course of your education, you might choose or decide that you want to transfer schools. I transferred schools. I went to Rio my first 2 years, which is, I don't even know who all's going to see this video eventually. If you're not from our area, University of Rio Grande, it's a couple minutes outside of Gallipolis, where I lived at the time. Went there. I mean, small school. I really liked my time. I remember my time there very fondly. I liked it a lot. Met a lot of great people there. Learned a lot. It was really a great time. I wanted to get away from home a little bit. I had my reasons, and a lot of it was just kind of flying out of the nest a little bit. I don't know if that sounded weird, but I wanted to get away a little bit. So I went to somewhere up in the Dayton area, which I've been referencing that school. It was the name of it was Cedarville University. I don't know if there's really any reason I can't say it. I think they're going to come sue me for using their name or anything like that. But it was just far enough away. I really enjoyed it once I got up there. But I liked Rio too. But the point of the story being, I reached a point when I wanted to transfer. In my college career, I know a lot of people who have done that, and doing that's fine. One of the biggest things you want to check on is that credits are going to transfer. And I know when I was looking at going to Cedarville, that was a big question that I had, is I wanted to make sure they were going to take my credits. And when I visited campus, I even took an unofficial Rio transcript with me. I said, hey, are you guys going to accept these credits? Because if not, I'm either not going to transfer or I'm going to transfer somewhere else. Like, I like your school. I want to come here, but I'm not going to hit reset either. And I think they took all but like 2 classes, and out of 2 years, that wasn't too bad. I could live with that. So I'm thinking one of those 2, they gave me like elective. I lost like almost nothing when I transferred. So it was all right for me. But I've heard of people losing half or more of their credits or almost all of their credits. And I've heard of people who haven't done research and they found this out and been in tears and admissions offices and things like that, or when it came time to schedule a class. So this is, if you think you want to transfer, this is really something you want to plan ahead and look at before you do it. Don't just show up somewhere with a transcript and realize that you can bring like a third of your credits with you or less, because that's just never a good position to be in. So thank you, Sandra. That was on my list. I always try to hit that. Transferring schools. And let's see if there's anything else. Oh, yeah, I had this on my list too when I talk to your students. It's always good to ask yourself why you're transferring, because I've had just people I've known just from here, from there, have talked to me and have wanted to transfer schools. And there's all kinds of reasons people want to transfer schools. I mean, some of them are very legitimate. Like in my case, I love my time at Rio. I was just ready to flap my wings a little bit. I keep struggling to find a good metaphor for that, but I just want to try something different. But that being said, if you're transferring because of a relationship, if you're trying to outrun something, I mean, there are some bad reasons to transfer to. So I would just, anytime you want to transfer, I would just try to make sure that your transfer is going to move you closer to your personal and educational goals. I think transferring should be, I would say, a proactive thing and not a reactive thing. Sometimes something happens and our first instinct is to run away from it. And unless you solve the problem, running away rarely, if ever, solves the issue. I mean, I guess unless like a bear is chasing you, then yeah, run away. But personal issues, they have a way of finding you. So don't transfer just to try to outrun something, because odds are you might go through a whole lot of headache only to find the issues are still there. So it's always good to ask yourself why you're transferring. Okay, I'm going to shift gears here and talk about financial aid, which is actually not one of my favorite things to talk about. It's complex and it's ever changing, so I'm just going to hit on a few basics. and like I said, it's I wherever you go to school, I highly recommend finding financial aid professionals who will help you. I know the very basics on this, and but like I said, some of them even change. And I am in no way, shape, or form even trying to masquerade as an expert on this. I am the furthest thing from it. I do just want to touch on a few basics. The first steps for getting a loan, one of the things you'll need to do is fill out a FAFSA. If you have not done that, FAFSA, sometimes I say it wrong, FAFSA, federal application, free application for federal student aid. There we go. I knew it would come to me. Like I said, I don't work in financial aid. You have to do a FAFSA for federal loans. Now, when it comes to federal loans, there's two types. We have unsubsidized and subsidized. Now, of the two, the subsidized loans, they tend to be more need-based, but they're the more desirable of the two because the government, while you're in school, if you defer the loans until you start paying them, the federal government, they pick up the interest. An unsubsidized loan, the interest accrues while you're in school. So that's going to be one of the differences on that. And you don't have to get a government loan either. You can get private loans. Like if I wanted to go back to school tomorrow, I could go to any bank and I could apply for an educational loan. With private loans, you might run into higher interest rates and things like that. You may not have some of the benefits you'll have with a federal loan. You definitely can look at that. I had a student contact me about a week or two ago, and I thought she had career major issues going on. It turned out she was talking about a transfer because I guess financial needs. And that was one thing I brought up. And I told her, I was like, I'm not an expert in this, get a second opinion, but have you considered private loans? Okay. Because they can be a really good service for whoever's out there. Work study is it's another great program that you can look at. Work study is also need-based, but it allows you to earn some money while you're in school. Jobs tend to be on campus. They can, depending upon your school and the agreements they might have with organizations in a community, they might actually be off-campus jobs. You usually will get paid minimum wage, at least in some cases a little bit better. It really depends upon what the job is. And for work study, if you would rather have the funds like put aside or diverted to pay for education, a lot of times that's an option as well. If you don't necessarily want the money, like you might be okay day to day, for instance, have that squared away, that maybe you just want to chip away at loan debt or something. And my understanding is you can do that. While we're talking about financial matters, a really good question last time I visited Gallia was, how do you build credit? And when it comes to building credit, I think getting a credit card is a really good idea. But that being said, a credit card's a lot like I told myself I was going to bring a hammer out here when when I did this, just to give you an example, to have a tool. Well, I have a pen here. I mean, it's not as dramatic, but it'll work. I mean, a pen, this is a tool. A pen's neither good or bad. A pen's a pen. It writes. Like, look, it really writes. Okay, it works. I can take notes with this. I can do great things with a pen. I can write someone an encouraging note with this pen, or I can go stab someone with this pen. Okay, the pen's neither good nor bad. It's what I choose to do with it. And a credit card is very much the same thing. That analogy would have worked a lot better with a hammer, but the pen had to work. I think if you get a credit card, you want to think about getting a really low credit limit. Don't get thousands upon thousands of dollars, because it's tempting to just want to go spend and spend and spend. And the other thing is, with a credit card, you do have to pay that money back. Unless now I've had friends that have told me that they've had friends that have gone through a bankruptcy and had that debt erased, or at least mostly erased, but you don't want to go through a bankruptcy. That is devastating to a credit score, at least for a number of years. So, but always remember, when you pay for something with a credit card, you do have to pay. You have to pay for that. It's not just you swipe and then the cost goes away. All right. So I think a low credit limit can help you out with that. And even that's kind of what I did, honestly. I got a credit card. I started putting groceries, gas, and just day-to-day expenses on it. I paid it off every month, and that typically tends to be a really good way to go. Let's see here. Also, things like utilities, whether it's maybe an apartment. If you get an apartment, we talked about that before, and this is where you have going back to being careful with roommates. This is another reason you want to be careful, because you are locked into a legal agreement with those people. So if you go to an apartment, maybe they stiff you on rent, or they skip out, and maybe a utility bill is not paid. I mean, theoretically, that could come back on your credit. I mean, it just depends on how things are set up, but you really want to be careful. I mean, it's going to depend on things like who's names on the bill, but that could be detrimental to your credit. So you want to think about stuff like that. Right. So in utilities, don't get them shut off, pay them on time. Like say rent, things like that. You get a car payment, don't start missing car payments. Don't start paying them late. Okay. They loan you money. They want their money. Where do you pay tuition? There's usually either they call it a bursar or a cashier's office. And on a college campus, these are the people they love to take your money. Okay. Most services, or bills or anything that pop up, a bursar. In some cases, it's called a cashier. They like to take your money. They will happily take your money all day long. Go and see these people. These are typically the people you see when you have to pay a bill. Someone had asked, what happens if you cannot get loans? Most people can qualify for a private loan, maybe an unsubsidized loan. In some cases, you might need a cosigner, and that's depending upon family situation. Some people are all over that and happy to do it. Some people might get funny about that. There's also, while we're talking about this too, I should have mentioned this earlier, we have things like grants and scholarships. Don't do what I did and assume that, I'll never get a scholarship. No one's going to want me to give me money. Some scholarships go unclaimed, if you can even believe that. A lot of them are unpublished. Sometimes a university's financial aid webpage may have links to scholarships, but also you may want to look at just community organizations and things like that as well, because you never know who at an organization is sponsoring a scholarship, who has money they want to give away. I believe it's like scholarships.com, I think is the name of the website. And even if you go on there, there's a lot as far as just scholarships go. So definitely look into them. The mistake I made was I thought, I'm an okay student, but I thought I'm not exceptional in any way, shape, or form. No one's going to want to give me money. Foolish assumption. So don't be like me. And honestly, when you apply for a scholarship, usually what's the worst that can happen? They tell you no. They might. I figure a lot of them are free. I think some of them might have maybe a slight application fee, but maybe. And a lot of times, even if it's not that, it might just be a time investment. But you stand to gain a lot more than you stand to lose. So throw your hat in the ring for scholarships, and you might be surprised at what you get. Don't be like me. Don't assume you're not going to get anything. How do I pay off loans if I have no money? Which is a situation we hope we don't find ourselves in, right? The good news is that student loans, they tend to be fairly flexible and something you can put into deferment if you lose your job or you have a hard time finding a job. Typically, you have 6 months after graduation until you need to start paying them. If something happens and you've not located gainful employment by then, call up Navient or whoever does federal loans, or if you have a private loan, call those people up and say, hey, here's my employment situation. It's not great. I'm struggling to pay for this. You might be able to either defer or in some cases pay a reduced amount. Sometimes they can do things like income based, and even if you're making a little bit of money, even if you throw a few bucks out in a month, you're still kind of chipping away at it. So you have options. So it's definitely something you want to look at. Things like, how do I make a living as cheap as possible? And especially if you live off campus, this is a great thing. Make a budget and stick to it. Find out what your cash flow is. Find out how much you're typically bringing in. Find out how much you're typically going to expect to spend in a given month. And here's a hint. If you're spending more than you're bringing in, that's bad. You need to make some adjustments. Maybe don't eat out 5 days a week, which with current events, I feel like we're probably all doing that, ordering food like 5 days a week. I'm probably doing it, I feel like, maybe more than usual. Typically speaking, it's not, especially if you're on a budget, it's not a great thing to eat out like 5 days a week. That can get expensive really quickly. So find out what you're earning, find out what your expenditures are, and ideally you'll have some money left over, and hopefully at the very least not not hemorrhaging money or anything like that. So that's the first step. Avoid expensive purchases like clothing, vehicles, things like that. Kind of going back to the credit card chat, self-discipline really is a virtue. And even into adulthood, if I wanted to, I could probably, sometimes I say I couldn't, but I know myself too well. I could probably spend myself crazy if I wanted to. I could go on eBay, I could go on Amazon, I could probably, before the night's out, drop thousands of dollars if I wanted to. But self-control is a really great thing. So that's going to be very important too. And also things like clothing. you want to look decent. Do you need to buy $200 jeans or $250 Nikes? No. Do you have to go buy a brand new vehicle? No. Having a vehicle is great. Do you have to have a brand new one? No. So making financial decisions like that can also be beneficial. Sandra, interesting. Maybe best aim for a 2-year degree first. Possibly. And associates, a lot of times I've even known people who've said, hey, I have an associate's degree. And by that, what they've meant is I've completed 2 years of college. I've known people that have made that statement. That being said, what I will talk about in regard to that is there are a lot of options out there that I think that are great that don't necessarily involve having a 4-year degree. 4-year degrees are great, and I still feel like they open a lot of doors. That said, they're not your only option. Go do a Google search. There's a lot of information out there about how we need tradespeople. I mean, would probably make the same, if not more, if I worked as an electrician or something. Now I'm working at home, but I typically at Marshall I work in a nice climate controlled office. And if I were an electrician, I might be like crawling on my stomach in crawl spaces and getting dirty and muddy and things like that versus working in a nice comfortable office. But a lot of times the fields can pay very well, and sometimes it's not even a degree. Sometimes it's a tech school, sometimes it's a certificate program, sometimes it's some kind of training after high school. So looking at options, and like I say, I never want to disparage a 4-year degree because I think they're great and they open doors for a lot of people. But the only thing I think is wrong is assuming that they're the only option for you, because I think I grew up and was raised and went through school at such a time where everyone was like 4-year degree, 4-year degree, 4-year degree. I graduated high school in 2005, so I grew up in the 90s and into the early 2000s. And I think back then everyone was 4-year degree, 4-year degree. I think we've kind of realized that they're good, but there's other things out there. So I hope that addresses that all right. But there's nothing that's ideal for everyone. So just, I've known, not that I necessarily bank on this, I've known people that have done great with no training past high school or without a high school diploma. I'm not going to recommend that. I wouldn't put my eggs in that basket. I wouldn't bet on that, but it happens. But point I'm getting at is just that 4-year degrees are great. They're not the only option out there. And it's just good to see what's out there. For instance, I've known people who worked, I know things like dental hygienist, physical therapy assistant. In some cases, they can make between $40,000 and $50,000 a year with a 2-year degree. So I know of people with master's degrees that don't earn that. So it's I think just good to look at all of your options is kind of where I'm going with that. Can I still apply for colleges for fall 2020? Let's see. You can, and we talked about FAFSA, the deadline for that. I checked this like right before we started to stream tonight. The deadline at this point is still June 30th, 2020. Given current events, will that be changed? I don't know. I've not heard that it will be. It wouldn't surprise me if it were. Very little surprises me anymore. Okay. At this point, it's still listed as June 30th, 2020. And the lowest average you can have to still graduate college. I think someone asked, maybe just kind of concerned about academic performance. Typically, it's going to be usually the lowest you can have without running into like serious trouble is going to be a 2.0. Often, if you're below a 2.0, you're going to be on academic probation or academic suspension. That said, certain programs themselves may have higher. They may have higher GPAs in mind. I know an example from Marshall was a college of education. They like you to keep a 2.8. I say like you to keep, you have to keep a 2.8. Some colleges, when I say colleges, because Marshall's a university with like some colleges. We have a college of business, a college of education, college of liberal arts, and so on and so forth. And I know education has the 2.8. So certain programs, certain colleges may have specific more stringent requirements, but in no cases do you want to plan on getting less than a 2.0 because then, and that's not even usually a rule for your university. That's a federal financial aid thing. If you're under a 2.0, they don't like that. At least as far as federal dollars go, they want to see that there's some kind of return on their investment. They want to see that you're making, they even call it SAP, satisfactory academic progress. They want to make sure that you're progressing nicely towards your degree. Because it used, even when I started college, there were people who would kind of hang out in college indefinitely and just borrow money and take classes. And I think I don't know this for sure. My strong suspicion is, and it seems like the timeline lines up, is right around the time all the financial stuff started happening, about 2008 or so. It really seems like a lot of the reins kind of got tightened on that. So does taking a gap year hurt your chances of getting into a certain college? I doubt it. And gap year, it was funny because someone had submitted this as a question the first time I went to Gallia. And when I got the question, I was like, what, a gap year? That's a terrible idea. Don't ever take a gap year. And then I did some research on it, and I was like, maybe gap years aren't really all that bad after all. The thing with a gap year is if you take a gap year, you want to have a plan. Don't just say, I'm going to take a gap year and then lay on the couch for a year, because that could turn into 5 years or 10 years or who knows. And you never know where you might find yourself, working when you're 30, 35, or 40. And I always like to be clear when I say this, because I say it in class presentations. I never ever like to put down an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And who knows, maybe if you work at a gas station or a McDonald's, maybe you're cool with that. And honest day's work, honest day's pay, I'll never disparage that. But I know a lot of people want, they set their sights at least a little higher. They want a little bit more earnings wise than that. But getting there, it takes planning early on, and don't assume, I'm going to lay on the couch for a year and then by 30 I'm going to be a CEO. I don't want to say never. I wouldn't be optimistic that that's going to happen. If you do take a gap year, I would have some specific goals for that. What are you going to try to refine your goals? Are you going to try to grow as a person? What are you going to be doing during that year? If you're not in school, I would think during a gap year you'd want to be improving yourself in some way, not just watching SpongeBob or Kardashians or whatever else, that Tiger guy, whatever. Have a plan. Let's see, tips on juggling college and a job. This is a really great question too. So you want to look at how much working and schooling you can do, because I've seen it a number of times. Students they'll decide they want to go to school full time. They'll decide they want to work full time, meaning 40 plus hours a week as a freshman plus going to school full time. Usually this does not end well. And it's not that, when I say that, it's not that I want to disparage, the person's work ethic. And a lot of times these people are working their butts off, but that's just a lot to deal with. I mean, college is, under the best of circumstances, is a big adjustment. And especially at Marshall, we have a lot of first generation students anyway. So to pair that with working 40 plus, I've heard of students trying to work like something like 6. I'm like, dude, I'm a professional. I don't work 60 hours. And I've heard of students trying to work 60 hours a week and go to school full time. They're like 18 years old. And I don't want to be disparaging. I try to be an encouraging person, but that's just kind of like setting yourself up for failure. It's just hard. So juggling college and a job, look at how much working and schooling you can do. If you do both full time, that's incredibly tough. I recommend people don't do that if at all possible. Figure out where you want to be on the continuum. Do you want to go to school part-time? And if you have to work full-time, do you want to work part-time, attend school full-time? Do you want to do both part-time? And it's something where there's not really a right or wrong answer. You just have to look at your situation and see what fits you the best. And you definitely can attend school part-time, but I know financially there can be some ramifications for that as well. Of course, in higher ed at the undergraduate level, full-time is usually defined as 12 credit hours. And typically, your average undergrad class is going to be 3 hours. Some are more than that. You do see that. 3 hours is very average. So now there was another question I've got some color-coded here I don't want to miss, and then I'm going to go back and give some final thoughts. And if there's any other questions, if we want to type those out right now, that would be wonderful. I think I'm kind of winding down. Of course, if there's any questions, I can definitely talk about this. This is kind of because I'm not by nature really a overly serious person or anything like that. This is a pretty serious question that was put forth, I believe last year is the last time in person I visited Gallia to talk to Mrs. May's classes. And the question kind of took me back a little bit when I was preparing to go there last year. And the question said, what do you do if you're sexually assaulted? And I was like, yikes. It's like we're talking about fraternities and I'm like, that's a legitimate question. if that, or even if it's not sexual assault, if it's something, if it's harassment, if it's anything like that, bullying, if someone is not treating you well in any way at college, tell someone. I think not only friends and family, but also universities have student affairs and student advocates and people who are put in place. The reason they are there, the reason they're even making a living from the university, is to look out for students in matters like this. So don't hide it. And when I say don't hide it, I mean, I know that can be a very sensitive topic, but I just encourage you, if things happen, just tell someone. Okay, because it is a very serious. It's a very serious topic. A couple of statistics on that, at least as of last year. I didn't update them. I don't think they've changed a whole lot. 20 to 25% of women will experience an attempted or completed sexual assault, and 5% of men will. Interestingly enough, ladies in college are less likely to be sexually assaulted than their non-college going counterparts, whereas men are actually more likely. So. Interestingly enough, August through November are some of the highest times when this happens too. A lot of times everyone shows up at college, people are new, maybe still getting the lay of the land, maybe not paying attention to their surroundings. I don't know. I'm just kind of tossing out some theories, kind of new to things. There's a lot that could go into it as well, but it's definitely something you want to watch out for, especially when you arrive at college. And it's not a pleasant topic to talk about, but things can and do happen. So, and I think another important thing is not just talking about what I do when it happens, but how do I mitigate the risk, and little things like don't be in places you shouldn't be, travel in groups and things like that can go a long way as well. Call someone if you feel uncomfortable. I know marshals, campus police, they will walk you to your car and things like that. If you get out of class and it's like, I don't feel comfortable walking to my car, they'll walk you to your car. And then a lot of universities will do things like that. So an unpleasant thing to talk about, but I'd rather, and I almost actually didn't talk about that one tonight, but I'd rather be uncomfortable and talk about it and maybe have someone think, instead of being caught off guard if something happens later on. It's just part of the world we live in. We don't like it, but we do have to kind of talk about it a little bit. Another question is, what do I do after college? Where do I go from there? I love this question because I don't know, in some ways I'm still figuring that out myself. I will tell you at Marshall, people like me in career education, we can help you from a career standpoint, but college is great because it prepares you hopefully not only with the degree, but also with connections, with experience, learning about yourself. So in a lot of ways, hopefully the world is your oyster when you graduate, cheesy as that might be, but sometimes having too many possibilities can just convolute things as well. But like I say, just seeing what's out there, finding people to talk to, people you trust at the university and beyond can really help you with that. And then that's something we all have to kind of make the decisions on. We all have to figure out what's in our future too. And even when you get to my age, the answer is not always solved or figured out. It's a continual process. So some parting words here, some parting pieces of advice, and I think I'll wrap it up. Of course, Andrew, you've had some great questions. If you want to type any last minute questions in while I'm going over this advice, that'd be great. And if not, I'll just go over these couple tips and then we'll probably call it a night. Some other tips is it's your future. Take ownership of it. Be proactive, not reactive. I know we already talked about that just a little bit. Go after opportunities. Don't wait on opportunities to come to you. They might, they won't always. So just be proactive on that. Get to know your professors. I talked about that a little bit already. I gave an example, and there's actually a couple of other examples too. Professors shouldn't be your adversary. I know we watch TV shows sometimes. Professors are portrayed as know-it-all windbags who are kind of almost like setting students up to fail. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, do they exist? Yeah. But most faculty members, they're passionate about their field. That's one reason they teach usually is they're very passionate about their field. But they typically are passionate about their students too. So get to know them, especially ones that are in the field that you're going into, because they can provide connections for jobs and things like that. Leads on jobs, career advice, can serve as great mentors for you. So get to know professors. Other tips, take good notes, learn how to study early on. I've actually found sometimes the students who struggle, and again, there's no scientific study here, but oftentimes students who did well in high school struggle in college, especially if they didn't feel that they were challenged in high school. Of the students in high school the ones who proudly proclaim, hey, I never had to study, which is, I mean, it's wonderful if you don't have to, if you can get by, I suppose. But college doesn't tend to be like that. And I found those students can tend to struggle quite a bit because they need to study and they don't know how. So learn how to take notes, learn how to study. And when we say taking notes, it doesn't mean writing everything frantically down. The professor says there's a method called the Cornell. That's Cornell, kind of like the university. Cornell method for note taking. You can Google that. That's because it has ways to like take notes and then to summarize on the same page. I think it tends to be very helpful. Learn campus resources and learn where they are, take advantage of them, because honestly, when you go to a college, you pay good money to be there, and your tuition dollars pay for a lot of resources that are there to help you. So definitely take advantage of it. Seize the day, take advantage of opportunities. We mentioned that a little bit already. Meet people, network, go to events, go to things you never thought you'd go to, shake a few hands. You never know who you're going to meet at places like that. Take care of your body. This is really important. You only get one. Okay, so take care of it. Work out. Okay, we talked about the freshman 15. I don't mean, you don't have to like be benching like, I don't know what's a lot, 350 or 400. I don't know what's a lot. Don't bench. You don't have to be like an insane athlete, but at least, go for walks, do some cardio, do something to keep yourself in shape. Work out, get sleep, don't abuse drugs and alcohol. At the bare minimum, if you do those things, you'll be in better shape, literally and figuratively. Take care of your body. Reach out and make friends. Don't wait for them to come to you. So take initiative and be bold. I know when I went away to college, I wasn't always the greatest at that. And then one day I was waiting on a class, and I was just like sitting in a lounge, and someone came up and talked. She's like, "Oh, hey, I know you. You're in my such and such class." And that was early on in my first semester, and I had 3 more semesters at the school, not counting that semester. And she ended up being one of my better friends. So I'm like, man, I'm happy I was sitting there that day, but I'm also happy she took the initiative because I sure didn't take it. But we ended up being really good friends, and she introduced me to other people, and we spent a lot of time together and hung out a lot of college. So say hi to people. I mean, get to know people, get yourself out of your shell, push yourself to do things you don't think you can do, because odds are you probably can do them. Learn how to get textbooks cheap, because oftentimes they're not cheap. Get involved in organizations, especially ones with leadership roles. Be thinking about building that resume, because when you graduate, you want to have a competitive resume when you graduate, if possible. Not just a good GPA, but have work experience, volunteering, extracurriculars, and things like that. Because even if you don't, the people who are applying for those same jobs after college as you, a lot of them will. So even if you don't, they will. So you definitely want to have that. Don't rely on a 4.0 exclusively, though. And I think I've made professors mad when I've gone into their class and said this at Marshall, but I don't care, because I think it's really important to put it like this. You want to be well-rounded, like I said, have work experience and things like that. Don't rely just on a 4.0. A 4.0 is an incredible achievement, but don't rely on it alone to open doors. Honestly, I've done hiring before. I'd almost always rather hire someone who's got a good GPA. I'm not talking like a 1.8. All right, I'm talking like a 3.2, 3.4, something like that, who's well-rounded, who has work experience, volunteer experience, they're connected on campus. I almost always rather hire that person than a 4.0 who's done absolutely nothing outside of their classes. Oh, I like that. Sandra, tell students to check in with parents daily. Good for parents to know their kids are okay. Yeah, absolutely. And especially these days with a text message, I think it's so easy. I know back even when I went away to school, I mean, we could send emails. I didn't email every day. I try to check in at least once or twice a week or something like that. I mean, we texted some. We had text messages. But I think these days there's just so many, Snapchat, there's just so many ways to stay connected. So every day, and if not every day, at least very often, stay in touch with your parents, because, they'll worry about you when you go away to school. So even if you're having a time of your life and not thinking about them, I guarantee you they're probably thinking about you. So don't be a stranger. Check in with them. Don't just have them be the place you go when you want to do laundry and get a free meal. Okay, parents don't like being used like that. They don't like being a bed and breakfast. If you're their kid, they want to be in your life. So check in with them. That's a really good point. I like that. Take college seriously, because you are paying for it. Right. Kind of like I said before, if someone wants to sit in my class and text, I'm not necessarily, if they're not harming anyone else, I'm not going to necessarily yell at someone every time that happens. But at the same time, they're paying who knows how many thousands of dollars to sit in one class and to text through the whole thing. It's stupid. Why would you do that? If you're not sure about a career choice, do a job shadow or interview a professional in a field. Like I said, make sure that the hard work you're putting out today is going to benefit you tomorrow. Don't be moving down an unproductive path for you. Now, like I said, who's to say what's right from a career standpoint? Who's to say what's right for you? Ultimately you, I suppose, but you don't have to do that on your own either. Don't just hope you have it figured out. Don't just say, oh, I'll figure it out. Don't just wander aimlessly. Don't just wait for inspiration to strike. Like that, I think is that migraine medicine where someone gets hit by the comet. I've worked with students. I think they've been waiting for inspiration to strike them like that comet. Don't do that. Reach out to people who can be of assistance to you, people who would love to talk to you about any of your career decisions and things like that. Well, I'm about out of things. Sandra, do you have anything else? I mean, if you have anything else, just type it in. I'll address it real quickly. If not, I think we'll probably wrap up. I'm gonna check in here real quick. Trying to think if there's anything else I've not covered. I think because I know when I went to Gallia previously, we've had a 40 some odd minute class period to talk, and I've not got to go through this many things, but seeing as we're pushing an hour and a half here, so I feel like probably everything I've had to say I've got to cover. I think Sandra says we're in good shape, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. I've enjoyed this. Like I said, I've never done one of these before. I've been trying to not be too scattered, trying to pay attention to my notes over here and at the chats as well, but yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know who will even watch this, how many people will see it. Thank you for anyone who's watched this for any length, especially if you put up with me for an hour and 24 minutes. that really deserves a thank you. Yeah, Denster 2005, Dennster 2005. I mean, if you're seeing this, obviously you found it. It's my YouTube channel. But if you have further questions, feel free to contact me. I'm always happy to talk with people, especially about college-related matters. Just be sure to let me know. And thank you, Sandra. Of course, I've always enjoyed coming to your classes out to high school. I mean, current events have made that not be possible this year, but I'm just happy with technology. We've found a way to hopefully at least somewhat replicate that. Something I'm thankful for. I've been saying all along, and I saw it on Facebook like an hour before this started, is even like 15 years ago, it would have really sucked to have been in a situation when we had dial-up internet and phones that didn't have color screens and stuff like that. But we have so many ways to stay connected even when we're physically apart. So I'm just happy we found a way to kind of replicate the experience. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off. But thank you again, and please reach out if you have any questions.